Hello and welcome to the 2 Cent Table, the podcast where people bring their 2 cents to the table. I'm Brian Bridges and I host this podcast with my mother, Carol Bridges. In the podcast's current state, the majority of these episodes will probably feature guests from our city of Moses Lake and the surrounding area. We'll generally try to keep topics interesting to listeners everywhere, but there may be times when we discuss our city, county, and state specifically. On this episode, we're talking to Tim Cloyd. Tim is the executive director at Serve Moses Lake, which is an organization that helps people who are in need, whether that be from homelessness, domestic abuse, needing a job, or various other situations. We ask him some of society's difficult questions about homeless people, poverty, and how others can respond to people's needs, or whether to even trust when a person says their needs are real. So now it's time to listen in on the conversation at the 2 Cent Table. So, Tim Cloyd.
Hello.
What all are you doing these days?
Well, in regards to this organization, I'm the executive director, so it's my job to keep the relationships with our partners, agency partners, and church partners in the community that we're all on the same page and connecting, as well as keeping this office staffed and operational.
So we're at Serve Moses Lake, and you're heading up the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
Yes.
then you're coordinating with churches, right?
That's right.
Well, what all does that entail?
You know, kind of in a nutshell, it's a clearinghouse. So if a person has a need and they go to, let's say, Church X, and that church doesn't have a relationship with that person, doesn't know them, then they send them to us, or if, just word on the street, they can come to our office, either set up an appointment or come in as a walk-in, and we'll verify their need to make sure that it's not a scam, or if it's a large need and there's many parts to it, we can direct people in the right places, and we can get perhaps a church or two to help support that person's need. If it's a utility bill, some housing, clothing, food, whatever the case might be, there's so many different needs.
I remember when it first got started, and I was thinking it was a good idea because it's hard to know, unless you have a central place that keeps track of everybody, it's hard to know if you have a church hopper, and they say, I need help at one church, then they go to the next one and say, I need help there. Yeah. So you guys can kind of keep track of who's who and what's going on where. Yeah,
we say, there's the kind of the negative side to it, but also the positive side. That negative side of if someone's trying to take an advantage of or abuse that system, one centralized place helps us see through that and helps us to hold a person accountable. But also, if they truly don't have a church community or anyone that they can go to for help, we can reach out to several to put the many pieces together. So it works both ways. If a person just goes to one church, they may not be able to assist them in all those ways. And so that we can come around and see that they can get whole services connected to it.
What is your relationship with the state agencies here? States like non-religious state agencies that give assistance to somebody?
I don't know if it's just this area, but we have just a great relationship with DSHS, the Washington State Assistance for Families, as well as the Grant County Housing Authority, and there's a number of other agencies, but I feel like God's given us favor with them, and we do have those kinds of forms that people fill out here, and on the other end to say they give permission to talk about the issue and the need there. So we're taking care of those things, and if there are HIPAA laws, then we can't, certain things we can't know. But for the most part, we've been able to communicate very, very well and put a plan together. For example, right now we get a call from someone at the hospital. This person had a issue and they needed a hotel because the place that they had been, they didn't have any electricity, and their condition needed electricity to help them to live, and so we were able to partner with the hospital and the housing authority might have been another agency, and just to participate in that. There's certain things that certain agencies can't do because of their funding requirements. We're able to just kind of go right in there and connect that. Sometimes the challenge is that we really want to have relationships with every person that is in need. So in this case, we never met the person, but it was a need, and we're a part of this community. We can help this Moses Lake person, so let's do it. So sometimes that happens, but otherwise, we're talking. We last Wednesday went up to the Housing Authority just to kind of get a refresher for our volunteers, and the homeless coordinator up there remarked that when she goes to state meetings about homelessness, she was able to brag about working with a faith-based organization that some of them have issues with and have struggled to that. Said, we're working really well together.
It's unusual and it's wonderful.
There's a mutual trust going on that they're doing their job and they're limited. We're doing our job to the best of our ability, and we're connecting and helping where we can and partnering at sometimes. Yep.
I'd be interested in knowing how this job and this exposure has changed you personally.
It has, for sure. I'll never forget when I was in Seattle at the time. I was a worship pastor for a church over there in Seattle. And Pastor Eric Fry called and said, "Hey, Tim, we're thinking about doing this thing. We're going to call it Serve Moses Lake, and we think you ought to be the director." And I just scratching my head thinking, okay, that sounds great, but you must have the wrong number. I was certain, what does a music guy, a worship leader, what does this have to do with what you're asking? Because to be honest, I don't like those kind of people.
Yeah, I wonder that. And also, you hadn't really been exposed that much to them,
Not
had
so
you?
much.
I mean,
Not so much.
I mean, you lived on the west side?
Well, I grew up in the East Coast.
Oh,
and
East Coast.
And came here in 1990, and then went to Seattle for 4 years. And certainly saw it, but was very disconnected from it. And it really it revealed just my own, just the ugliness of my own heart, really. It was like, okay, well, I'm sure those people, those people have issues, but I never cared to want to know. So it was actually pretty convicting to me.
Did you get an answer? Do you know why he thought of you?
Yeah, he loved how I connected in this community. For whatever various reasons, God placed me. I had been a teacher at Moses Lake High School, Frontier Junior High. I was there when that shooting happened, so I was a part of that. Brought our community together for worship through all of that, and was just engaged with lots of the churches. At the time, I might have been the only worship leader full-time in the community. I can't remember, there might have been another, but so God placed me in that position, and I was connecting with all the churches, and he just saw how that was going to be a critical part of bringing this together. Who could they think of that could help bring the different churches with their own agendas and their own different thoughts about things, who could bring it all together? And so that's what they thought
makes
that I could
sense,
do.
yeah.
And then I'd be able to work with volunteers coming from different traditions and put us on the same page, hopefully. So that part excited me. But still, to be honest, again, the journey walking actually with our clients is still difficult to this day for me. And I really need God in that. It's something, my heart gets hard, it gets calloused against hearing these same kind of stories. I roll my eyes, but I know that I need to respond with compassion, and it doesn't come naturally from me. Mm-hmm. So I really need his help in that.
Do you feel like you can tell somebody, do you have a better idea when you talk to somebody whether they're telling you the truth or not? Have you developed a skill there?
Well, okay, just in part because we are the one centralized place, and we might be taken the first time, but not likely to be taken the second time. So that alone is one thing. It's, well, you just came in here last month asking for the same thing. And we, as we dig a little bit deeper, this is what you're telling me. Something's not lining up on paper here, whether it's the finances or we can't verify, so we put the burden back on the person to take responsibility. Can you help us verify this? Because if you can't, sorry, we're not going to be able to help you. So that part is there, but then, just trying to, and still, it's not a perfect system. And even in saying that, I realize, there's always going to be the human element, and we want to be available for whatever that human element might be. And if we get taken, then so be it. And maybe there was a reason for that. And we still want to be compassionate and in grace, but there's a balance there, truth and grace, and trying to walk with people, hold people accountable, and keep it, a relational thing, so it's not a transaction.
Do you ever feel like maybe you're enabling people to stay in a bad situation?
Oh,
I mean, that's a common thought.
Yeah. And it's a common question that we have. We'll often ask ourselves that. Are we enabling a person to stay in that place? Or are there steps that we can help them take still, so that they've got dignity, they're taking responsibility, but they're not alone in this? What are the steps that we can take? Because we don't know all that's going on mentally, emotionally, spiritually with that person. There may be reasons why they're unable to move forward. Some of our homeless guests that come through here regularly for coffee or a lunch or something like that, or some hygiene items, some are just not in a place emotionally that they can move forward. And so for us to say, well, we're not going to help them is I think is hard-hearted on our part. But we're not going to, every time someone in and say, could you put us up for a hotel, we're probably not going to do that, because there's a continued abuse of that, and it's just not healthy for anyone in that regard.
Do you usually have an end goal when you start helping somebody? Is there usually like a plan, or is they just, how do you know if they just want a one-time thing, or if they're saying, hey, I'm working towards getting a job, or I want to get back on my feet, or how does that usually work out?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, I grew up in a pretty strong middle-class family that, we all, my parents worked really hard. And so I have in my mind, this is what healthy living looks like. That's not necessarily the same case for everybody that comes to our door, whether that's just a lack of vision or, no, this is, I'm up here or down there, or however that works on there. I don't need those other things. And so for me to judge what is a success is hard. So the basics are, though, are you going to be able to sustain this this living pattern? And do you think it's healthy? I might not think it's so healthy, but you might think it's healthy. So I can't place my construct on someone else that way. But just ask the questions. Is this sustainable? Do you have healthy relationships that are going to help you in your journey as you continue? What part can we play in that? In our mission, we say helping people, encouraging reconciliation, and connecting them to the local church. The first part's probably the easiest. We can do that in physical, tangible ways. We can help someone. We can help them put a plan in action. Encouraging reconciliation is a little bit harder because it depends on more than one person. If it's a reconciliation with a family or a previous employer or another agency, perhaps, it needs, there's a lot that has to happen there. But connecting to the local church, we believe, is one of the most healthy things that a person can do on their journey so that they'll have a support system around them to keep moving forward. So if all those things happen, then we feel like that's a success. If only one of them or only part of one happens, well, okay, it's still on a journey, and maybe the timing has not arrived yet.
That brings up an interesting thought in my mind, because I read a book about poverty, understanding poverty, and of course didn't figure out ahead of time that I was going to talk to you about this and think of the author and the name of the book. Typical. But it opened my eyes, because we had been, in our family, we had been working with a person who had lived in a poverty situation all her growing up and had continued that in her adult life, and now her children were living that out. And when I say poverty, I mean they were always using government assistance. She was disabled, so she received SSI. And we became close enough that I saw a part of life that I had never seen before. I was angry a lot of the time because I thought that she would have the same idea about things as I did. In other words, she would say, I'm in trouble, I need groceries. So I would go pick her up and take her to the grocery store, and then she used a cart, a driving cart. So I would wait for her to go, and when she came with her groceries, it would be things that I wouldn't think you would buy if you were using someone else's money and if you were desperate. In other words, there were things in there that were, pop and cookies, and it really took me by surprise, and sometimes made me angry, because I thought that she would think the way I think, and she didn't. Also, I found that she didn't value the same things I valued. And she would let people come, relatives, which I considered to be deadbeat relatives, come and stay with her because they were family. Yep. And I would think, what in the world? Yeah. Kick this person out. They're just feeding on you, and have all these thoughts. But she said, well, they're family. And so I found that her values were different than mine. And of course, family is important to me, but I also have certain expectations of family. Exactly. And so when I read the book about poverty, I found out that the basically, or generally speaking, I know there's always, you have to make a disclaimer here, there's always differences, but generally speaking, those who live in that income level have different values. They often value relationships more than maybe having a nice couch or buying a house. They're used to renting. They're used to living here and then here and then here. It was it was enlightening to me to find out the differences in middle class, poverty, and wealthy, and whole new eye-opening thing. It all matched. As I read the book, I thought, now I see why she thought the way she thought, and it's not like me. Right. But some of the things I thought, well, actually, she might be more compassionate than me. So I feel like I'm being compassionate towards her, and yet I learned some things from her. She passed away eventually, so she's not in our lives anymore, but it was a valuable learning experience.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I've probably read the same book. I'm not sure which one, but there are other books, and that comparison of what are the values that we hold to, either what we've grown up into or what we've become accustomed to, and somehow it kind of sinks into us, and now all of a sudden these are our priorities and what we measure our life contentment and success by, and they're not the same. Mm-hmm. Even similar words like loyalty, I would have a different definition perhaps of loyalty than this individual probably had about their family. As you mentioned, there's expectations that come along with loyalty within your own family, in terms of, I mean, there's grace there, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what
yeah.
you mean. Yeah.
And so I can't assume that we're talking the same thing, and I can't impose my values on someone else. But I can encourage them to discover, their own, their own journey. They don't have to stay in that place if that's all they've ever seen. We can help maybe put some pieces together that when you're ready, if you want to change something about that you don't like, there are steps that you can take that can be more healthy for you and your children and your family without giving up that loyalty. Mm-hmm. Although that's a very powerful thing. If someone feels they're being disloyal by going after an education or something like that, that can really be twisted around quite quickly. Mm-hmm. And then people, think, oh, I can't do that because I'm being disloyal to my parents who didn't have that education or whatever the case might be.
So they don't want to be put in a category of she thinks or he thinks he's more higher or better than us.
Yep.
And so she's going after higher, better things or whatever.
Yeah. But if you wanna play the game of being able to survive in this community, in this culture, which is predominantly middle class there, then you have to play by these rules. Mm-hmm. And you have to learn what those rules are. And so there's part of that. We'd actually like to increase, some of our I guess programs, to use that word, but where we can educate and come alongside of. So it's not just us telling people what to do, but it's what are the roadblocks you're facing, and what are your own thoughts about how to get over those roadblocks? How can we come alongside of you and help you as you're moving forward? Those kinds of things, I think, are where we're headed in the future for us. Instead of I think what we've done, this is our 10th anniversary.
Really?
It's amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah, 2008, that fall is when we started. And so we're thinking, well, this model has served us well, mm-hmm. in terms of bringing churches together and the community, connecting them and helping people accomplish some of those things. But what's the next step? It's probably more of that kind of a journey of, let's put a bigger plan together to help you get where you want to go in a healthy way. And we're hoping along the way that as we're loving, as we're speaking truth in a graceful way, that it'll draw people to Jesus and draw people to the church. And we want to glorify God in what we do, but we're not going to try to trick people into the church, or we just want it to be something that's attractive and like, yeah, that's what I want. Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in the homelessness in this area. I know that we were doing some cleanup one time with the city when their annual cleanup day. We ran across a house, sort of cardboard, utensils.
Yeah.
And we were doing cleanup, so I just thought, oh, someone's abandoned this. Somebody was staying here, and I picked it all up. Found some restaurant silverware, found plasticware, all kinds of empty bottles, and threw them all in my bag and cleaned up the cardboard, and then left. And then I talked to Brian later, and he goes, "You may have taken someone's house," and I hadn't really thought of that. I was thinking of, well, here's a mess. I better clean it up, and then. But I think it might have been abandoned, but really I'm not sure. Maybe somebody came back and everything was gone. And I thought I was cleaning up a mess, doing a favor.
And they think they've been robbed.
Yeah, and really, it was a little mind rattling to me. So I know there's homelessness here. I don't believe every sign I see on the corner, and it's just increased in the last few years. A number of people that are holding, and I don't know why they always hold the cardboard sign. I always think, why don't you get something more readable? But they hold a cardboard sign and they're asking for money. And I see people stopping and giving money. And then I see other people avoiding eye contact. Sure. And you can tell there's all kinds of feelings. And I have a lot of, I just have never come to a comfortable place in my mind where I can drive by without feeling bad or guilty, but at the same time I realize, I have had relatives, some great nephews that they do that. They ask for money. They don't have jobs. They use drugs. They're just goofing off, and so it's not helpful to support them, but I can't tell the difference. Mm-hmm. The other thing I've seen is so many of them have dogs. Mm-hmm. And I go by and I think, you can't afford a dog. What are you doing? Then I think, so you think, I have this mixed feeling again. I think, we can't afford a dog. What are you doing? You can't feed yourself. And then the next thought I thought, who are you to tell somebody they can't have a dog? That may be the only relationship they have right now. So I realize we have a problem. I don't know how big it is. I don't know. I can't discern by looking whether someone's really homeless and if there's a reason for that. So it always puts me in just a mixed feeling of, I actually have the means to help. Is it really help?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. I don't have hard numbers to back this up. It's mostly just been from conversations with others, but it appears that the majority of the reason for homelessness is a combination of substance abuse and mental health, and those two are closely related. Mm-hmm. Sometimes one brings the other, or one keeps the other around. So that's probably the highest percentage, and I don't know if I could guess a number, but it's pretty high. The others, that there are some veterans that through the trauma, and I would say a lot of the others that are mental health issues or substance abuse are also trauma induced for various, there's all kinds of traumas there. And so, so you get some veterans that are homeless because of trauma, things going on, can't stay in one place, can't hold jobs. Same with the substance and mental health, can't hold on to jobs. We'll try for a while, something wrong will happen, and then it's over. So it's this perpetual cycle of how do we help someone,
And sometimes I think that when I drive by, and one day I saw 3 people in a row who said homeless vet, and I thought, well, maybe, I don't know. But then I would, and then some of them I think, yeah, you're not a homeless vet. And then I think to myself, well, homeless vets or scammers need to eat too. I mean, drug abusers need to eat too.
That's right.
Felons need to eat too.
Yeah.
So so then I think, well, how do you decide who's deserving and who's not deserving? Because everyone needs food. If they're doing the wrong thing, they still need food. So it's a difficult thing.
And it's really a food insecurity issue. There's not a lack of food.
Well,
not
I know.
In our country.
I know, and I participate in the sack lunches.
Right.
Every Tuesday we go down to YD and make 40 bagged lunches, and we have a little crew that comes and you hand them out. About, is it almost 40 a day?
Well, actually, this week it spiked up, so we had to call your leader and ask for more this morning because we were completely out. they were all gone. Whatever that was, 40 or 50 that were gone yesterday, just in one day. So it's like, okay, so it's an unpredictable thing, but we'll probably average, 75 or 80 in our 4 days that we hand them out. About 20.
Do you see the same people coming in?
Mm-hmm. Mm. But it's more than that. There's probably a core group of maybe 5 or 10 that are almost daily, not completely daily, but every other kind of a thing. And then someone we haven't seen in a month will come again, and then some people we haven't ever seen. So it's a mixed bag, and we don't at that point we don't ask a lot of questions at that place. It's not, you don't have to have an appointment here. You can just come and you can
come and get a lunch.
Yeah, just come and ask. And some of the things that drive us to do that for homeless is this is something that we can do. Like you said, everyone needs to eat, and this is something that we can do. And if we're consistent in the manner that there's dignity involved, and I don't know how dignifying it is to have to come into a place and ask. I haven't had to do that. But there's a little bit of relationship that goes on. Sometimes we'll remember face and, oh, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, rough night, yeah, can we pray for you? If the time allows for it, there's a bit of relationship that can happen. We'd actually like to be able to serve a meal where we can actually sit down. Now, for some people, that's not going to work. They don't,
they don't want the relationship. They don't
or
want,
to just be inside with that many people.
Yeah, anxiety and who knows what.
Things.
Yeah.
But we're thinking to have a consistent presence is where we should be at this point. To be available, it has happened. People come in, can you help me get out of here? I got to get out of this community. I can't stay. I'm in this cycle. I can't change the people around me. I can never get out of this cycle. Can you help me? And so we've been able to send people back to other family members. We've been able to verify. We haven't done that a lot, but there's a handful of cases because we've seen this ongoing thing. Yeah, that probably nothing's going to change until something horrific happens. So let's get them where their family is. So we'll do that. Or I think I'm ready for, you've told me about this program, Tri-Cities, or, I'm ready to give that a shot. Okay. So we're just believing that our kindness is consistent and will be available when the time comes.
I kind of interrupted you there. You were talking about there is food in America. There's no shortage for the homeless people.
Yeah. It's kind of an insecurity, though. It's a food insecurity. That's what I've read anyways. And it's like, oh, that makes sense to me. Where there's maybe, I don't know all the dynamics to it, maybe because they feel like, that they have to hoard their amount because that's the reality that they live in, that people just come and go and they take without, so I feel like I never have enough for me. I don't know if maybe that's part of it, or it's, it is a limited amount, whether you're getting DSHS food stamps or you're coming here to ask for some help. It is a limited amount, and so it's not this huge amount that's always available whenever I want it. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be an anxiety that people face. Is like, I don't have enough.
Mm-hmm. What? Let's talk about the warming center a bit. The people that don't have a place to stay during the winter months, and I know this year it was at YD.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about how many people and where you got the volunteers and what the people were like who came in? What kind of, is it male, female? What's the mix? Yeah. What's the age group?
Yeah, the Homeless Task Force of Grant County, and it's just a task force. It's not a nonprofit. It's not a county organization. It's just that we're trying to serve all of Grant County, those that are experiencing homeless. We advise our county commissioners on how we think the money that is designated for to assist homelessness how best to use that. But what was birthed out of this journey was we could do something tangibly, physically here in Moses Lake. Even though it's a long stretched out county, this makes the most sense. Most of us are here. And so if we can create a safe place for people during the coldest winter months, then let's do that. It's going to take a little bit of money. It's going to take several volunteers, but we think we can do this. And so we kind of put together, this is what it looks like, some boundaries, some parameters on it. And then we just kind of reached out to the church community, and people responded quite generously, both in physical, financial, and volunteerism. This was our third year, I believe. And so we've seen kind of a growth. And I know even in that, there's argument that, well, as soon as you build something, they will come, kind of a thing.
Right, you're going to bring all the homeless people here. Way to go, Tim.
But what we've really found, though, and we have to even get better at the way that we ask our questions, but it seems like it's, at least 70%, it's probably higher. People were confused about what we were asking when we were saying where they're from. And
yeah, I came from the East Coast, yeah.
But it appears that most of those that utilize the warming center either have family here in this area, Grant County area. They have children that they're estranged from, that they want to be near and have some sort of connection. That's still a very strong thing. And so if I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be homeless here.
I see.
And so that seemed to be the majority. Mm-hmm. So I think we had 185. There's probably some written down somewhere, but I think we had 185 different individuals during those 3 months, December, January, February. There were a number of repeaters through that time. I think we averaged about 31 or so per night. Some would come. We had a meal that was provided at the beginning, and they would stay for the meal and for a little while get warm and then leave. Others would come in kind of midnight or in the middle of the night, stay, rest, sleep, have some coffee, have some soup, things like there, and then leave in the morning. Male, female. I think we had more males than female. I don't remember the breakdown on that. If we had a family that would come, we would try to get them immediately into services, even putting them up in a hotel. There were funds through the Homeless Task Force or through the Housing Authority, homeless dollars allotted to help them, and then get them into services that could help them get settled. Yeah, we've had a few college students that had no place to go when school was shut down for the winter break. They're on their own, don't have family or friends, at least nearby, so they stayed there too.
That's shocking, isn't it? I can't imagine that. Yeah.
We had kind of a cool story, was being able to reunite a father and son with some family in Spokane, I guess, that they had lost track of, and so we were able to get them reconnected. So that was encouraging. That was cool. The idea was to hopefully have it be a safe enough place where people could share where they're at and how can we help them take the next steps into more secure living and sustainable things. So, the Housing Authority was a part of that group. DSHS was a part of that group. We had mental health services available. Probably the best thing for us this year was that we had a consistent presence. We had a manager that oversaw it, that was there every night, at least for the beginning, the check-in time, and we had some mental health folks that were available to assist and get them into some services.
So you had a lot of good volunteers that helped out there. I guess a volunteer, in that if they're working for the state, I don't know if that's a volunteer, but I mean they're coming to help out. So what would I expect if I was homeless and I came to the warming center? What would I see and what would happen to me?
You'd walk in, there'd be a brief check-in. We do want it to be a safe place, so we want to make sure that you can keep your items in a secure bin for the time that you're here. And that, Excuse me.
Gentleman lives in his truck, needs $307 to fix the brakes. I told him $300 was too much, and if he could get it down to a little. I'm thinking like the last 100, maybe.
Yeah. Does that seem like that might be doable for him?
He says he's broke, but you never know.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking we could probably do up to half of that to help.
Okay.
Yeah, if he can find some other avenues there, we can probably help with half of that.
Okay. He does work seasonally, so he'll be getting work anytime.
Oh, good.
So it's possible with his first paycheck he can handle the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. If you're curious, that was, the way that we work. If someone's coming in here and they have a specific need, try to verify the need. And she didn't share all of the background, all the pictures, so I don't actually know. But she's done the work of seeing if there's any history there and if there's any patterns to address, and verifying that need. And then we can come alongside. We often will ask a person, even if they say that they can't, we'll often ask them to come up with a portion of that, whether that's half, and then we'll do the last half so that we're working together towards a solution. Yeah, seemed like a reasonable thing, because we don't really know a person's resources until we say, well, we're willing to do this, and then they'll go out and find that and come back, and then we'll come alongside and help, and then we'll make a recommendation to one or more of our churches and ask them to pay that need directly. So you're going to go meet with Pastor so-and-so at that church, but we've already verified your needs, so they're expecting to help you. They're not going to interrogate you. They just want to connect with you. And so that's kind of how it happens in a quick nutshell. Where were we?
Somebody was checking in and you mentioned something about a bin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, so we're concerned about your safety and the safety of others. So we're going to put all your things here in this bin. We're going to mark it so it's got your number. Here's your number. So a brief check-in system with just a few questions, so it's not some lengthy interrogation. Where you're from, do you have any family, any things like that they're willing to share with us. And then there's we usually had a meal at about 8 o'clock every night, a hot meal, a hot fresh meal. And some of those, sometimes they were elaborate, sometimes minimal, but it was always good, always fresh and hot. And there, inevitably, people from the church would come with that meal and sit and chat and connect with people. And we feel like if it's wanted, it's a strong thing.
Right.
Because you are a fellow human being and you're worthy of my attention, and if you want it.
And I would think there would be, some of the people would be out and about by themselves. So most of the time when you see people on the street, they're by themselves. Occasionally you see a couple, but usually they're by themselves. And I think we all need human connection.
Yeah, and there usually is a network we don't see that's going on. It's amazing if something is said here, how quick that gets out. We heard.
Yeah, so they're talking.
Yeah, there's a network there. So that's available at the beginning, and then you can stay. If you want to play a game, you can play a game. You want to read a book, you can go sit in that recliner and rest.
And you don't have beds.
We don't.
So, and there's some state regulations.
Yeah. Well, city code. If we're going to have a sleeping facility, then we have to have full sprinkler system, and we don't have that. And in any of the locations this is only our second different location that we've used, and different insurances would kick into place.
And that is why you have to limit your hours. Is that correct?
Well, we limit our hours mostly because we need the oversight to make it all the way.
So if you're going to use volunteers, they may need to get to work or.
Yeah. So we made it. We made it in two different shifts: 8 to 1 and 1 to 6 a.m. and different
And
volunteers.
you have been able to find volunteers.
We have. This was the hardest year, especially for that 1 to 6 a.m. shift. People can do the 8 to 1 and then go home. That 1 to 6 is pretty tough.
I would think it would be tough.
So we're talking about what would it take for us to hire for those shifts.
So that becomes a job or a part-time job rather than people who have already working and
it also provides consistency. That's probably the biggest thing that came out of this debrief for this last year's was the consistency of having our manager in place, just one person, the same person. Almost every night she was there at the beginning to check people in and connect with people and here are some, and we'd have blankets and hygiene items and coats and all those kinds of things there as well.
I saw that at when I was at YD making sandwiches one day. I looked and there were bins of coats and bins of personal hygiene items, and I thought this is really encouraging to see how generous people in the community have been.
Yeah. So those things, and then having those mental health counselors available and consistent. They were the same people. It wasn't a new person every night. It was the same people. So that was huge. That really helped people feel safe and at ease. And okay, this is the routine. I get it. All right, I can do this.
If a person volunteers, what can they expect to see and do?
Well, if we continue with this, there were 3 ways to volunteer. There's probably more, but the 3 that come to my mind is you could be a part of the cleaning crew, because some people, either they have that time, or I just want to do behind the scenes kinds of things, so they'll clean it every day. I want to be a part of a meal. It's been easier for us to organize it by having a church supply the meal for that week. This is your week. And then you prepare your meal in a health district approved kitchen. And then you bring it down and serve it and clean up after yourself. That makes it easy on us. If you were an individual that wanted to be part of that, we'd say, well, do you by chance happen to be part of any of the churches here? And could you sign up with your own church to be a part of the cooking crew for that? Or you could stay overnight, either one of those shifts, the 8 to, just to oversee, make sure everything's okay. And we would train you for that. Here's some things to be concerned about for safety, and here's our pattern. We have smoke breaks at this time, all those kinds of details. And so those are the 3 main ways. Other people were always bringing us supplies, donating water, donating food supplies, plates, napkins, those kinds of things.
Do you find that, I don't know if you have anything to compare it to, but do you find that this is a generous community?
I do. Only in that we've never come up short. Whenever the need's been put out there, it seems like we get a lot more than we needed or expected. So,
what do you find that's difficult? What about, is it attitudes, or is it just, what do you bump up against that makes your job difficult in our community?
The thing that breaks our heart here is that when we're working with someone, that's come in often, and you get to know that person, and you find out, they got struggles and dreams, or it's just like me, and think, oh, I could be your friend, your neighbor, your co-worker, and yet it doesn't seem like you want to take the next step to get out of this hole, this damaging hole to your physical being, your emotional being. And we offer this, and you're afraid to take it, or there's roadblocks you just can't see around.
Do you think people do it because it's familiar, or have they defined themselves as a person that as they are right now and don't have a vision or an imagination to see themselves anywhere else?
I think fear is just a huge thing. This is what I know.
Right.
I know, even when it goes really bad,
At
I
least
know
it's
this.
familiar.
I know this. I know my network, even if you say it's not healthy. I know this network, and there is a loyalty in that network.
Well, I've compared it to in my own life. I've thought, what if I was going to pursue a bigger business and start? Yeah, I thought, and my boss at the hotel a few years back was kind of doing that. He had friends in networking in Seattle, and it's a different kind of culture. It's a different world. They go golfing, they buy expensive dinners, they talk about whiskeys, and it's a world that I would have to learn about if I was going to get into it. And I imagine it's the same if you're in a place of homelessness and suddenly you want to, even just to get into this middle class business world, you don't have the same experiences, you don't have the same goals, you don't have the same, it's hard to connect, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And all your friends, you can't like go home and vent to them because they may not know it either. They may not understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
You almost have to get new friends in a way, especially if the other ones are holding you back or holding you down.
At least the book I read talked about having to get new friends, forsake friends, and that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's a risk. It's a huge risk. And to learn a whole new language, it's like a foreign language. It's not, I don't know what that means or what impact that has.
When I became manager at the hotel for a couple years, I had to learn all sorts of new terms and learn about new things I'd never even dealt with before.
But you could pull back, though, couldn't you draw back from, okay, this might be hard, but I'll get through this. Mm-hmm. You had enough self-awareness, I guess, and confidence, or even support. I can do this. I don't know if,
and I
feel like a lot of people don't have
a lot of
that.
access to learning too, because I was hooked up to the internet, and I had, like, I was able to watch Hotel Impossible, and like there was a lot of resources, and I already knew how to build a website and how to use a computer and how to send emails and how to do this professional stuff, and there was a lot of training that I had in my back pocket that I could pull out and say, all right, I'm ready to do this.
And a lot of us, I think, we grew up learning how to learn, and it serves us well to be able to keep moving on. I had no idea how to run something like this, but I had thought, well, I'm up for it. I'll surround myself with other people that can help me. We can do this. But if all of your network has never stepped out of that, you don't have the confidence to move forward and to step into another land.
That reminds me of the book I read about poverty. When they talked about middle class, they had a list of questions to say, are you typical middle class? Do you know how to open a checking account? And I'm thinking, goodness sakes, I've had a checking account since I was 15, Of course I know how to, yes, that's it. Framework for Understanding Poverty, yeah. And then they asked, he's obviously read it. It's full of tabs, markers. They ask you, could you sign your child up for piano lessons? And I said, I signed all my kids up for piano lessons. Of course I know that, would you know how to register for college? And do you know what an escrow is? Do you know what, the steps that you would take to buy a house? All these questions that we've lived through and we've taken for granted because our parents did it and they knew. And certainly if I wanted my child in ballet, I would go to my friends. I would say, what's your experience? What did you have to pay? Who did you hire? What was your experience? And then I would, because my friend network is like me, and I know I could find the place to go. Yeah. So those questions that I read, I took for granted, and I kind of forgot that other people might not even know how to open a checking account.
Yeah.
So even if you were going into a thing that's unfamiliar to you, you could become familiar with it just through your friends' network.
I think so. Yeah, I probably, I might not know where to buy diamonds, because I don't have any really, really wealthy friends, I don't think. But
you'd probably have the confidence to even go ask some stranger about that.
They're the jeweler down the street. I mean, I have a relationship with him, and so I could go start talking to people.
I even think, because I think the book even talks about, okay, so you're a middle class person. Can you answer the questions from the wealthy class? And I can't answer several of them, but I don't think I'd be afraid to go ask somebody, even if I didn't really know them. I feel like, because of the way I grew up, I have this confidence built in me to go after something else. And, I think that's part of what's missing down here is even the self-confidence to be able to, it's not that you don't have the network, but you don't have the confidence to face that fear and to go ask someone else. Because
Again, people have defined themselves in
Sure.
a different way, and they can't visualize doing anything different.
Yeah, but I think fear is so crippling. I mean, we've all experienced fear in whatever ways.
Absolutely.
And it's so crippling. And so that's part of what we're hoping is that, and we've seen it happen when someone feels hopeless or they just feel so frozen, I can't do this. And we just share a bit of our story with them. This is how I had to face this fear, or man, I was really angry at God about this, or whatever the case might be, and just being open and honest about those things. It kind of opens up the dialogue, and then people feel relieved. And then it's like, okay, now we can go a little bit more, because at least we got through that barrier, and there's a connection now. There's a person-to-person connection. And so we're trying to figure out what are those next step things can we do to journey with people.
We're coming up on an hour. Can you think of any frequently asked questions that we didn't mention that could get broadcast out?
Some people do ask from the community, okay, so what do I do when I see someone with a sign on the street corner? And I've often suggested that if you had some ready-made hygiene snack kits in your car that you could hand out, it's a tangible thing. It's and maybe it has a certain mosaic card in it, or it has some, there's other ways to point people in a direction just to let them know it's available. But it's something. Maybe you can feel like, okay, I responded. I looked them in the eye. Sorry you're going through a difficult time. Here, maybe this will help. It's a tangible thing that people can do.
And that's not something that they could go blow on alcohol or...
Well, you'd have to be pretty creative.
Yeah.
I suppose you could try to sell some of those items.
Wheeling and dealing.
Get the cash for. When I spoke to the mobile outreach team that's a part of the Grant Mental Health Care, they have this red van that goes around and says, so tell me your philosophy on helping those that this is a substance abuse issue. I said, well, they're legitimately hungry right now. They may have used their money on other things, and part of us might say, shouldn't have done that, so now you got to learn your lesson, kind of a thing. But in this addiction, until you get out of that addiction, it's your reality, and you're still really, really hungry. So if you give them money, they felt like you could give them money right there, and they would use it to go buy a hamburger, that they wouldn't use that money for drugs. They're either on it or coming off of it and really, really hungry. And so they're going to use that money that you give them right now for food.
Interesting.
But you don't always know when the timing of that's going on. So I thought, well, just give them the food. Just give them some tangible hygiene items that are always going to be a need. there. You're not really having to discern where they are in that cycle.
Well, and we can't, really.
No.
We can't. And even if we ask, we might not get, we don't have the trust relationship with someone for them to even, tell us details of their life. And that's what we're doing. We're asking, we're before I give, you gotta prove yourself to me, And we haven't proved ourselves to them either. So why should they tell us,
Yeah. So, treat people with dignity and kindness. Here's a tangible way to show kindness. Some people, if you say, have you been to Sir Moses Lake? Oh yeah, they can't do anything for me.
I've heard that many times.
Yeah. And there is only so much we're going to be able to do until you're ready to make that next step. But you can always come here for coffee, conversation, hot meal. We have hot meals in the afternoon, or sack lunch, blankets, those kinds of things. So it's not that we won't do anything. It's just that we're only able to do so many things.
So people give you money to help support this organization. What else can they give?
We're always on the lookout for gently used furniture items, and we want to be available to help a person when they're in transition, whether that's a domestic violence issue and someone had to leave everything and starting without anything. So we're often able to come alongside New Hope and say, here's some furniture, or if someone comes directly, they don't have to come through New Hope, and so we can help them with a bed, or just kind of think of the main things: a table and chair to eat your lunch, dinner at, maybe a couch, maybe a bed, nightstand, those kind of main furniture items. If you have little things, household goods, we try to send you either toward Calico Cat, because we have a good working relationship with them and we're able to do a voucher with them. So that's been a good thing. We're just finishing up a non-food pantry drive. So we have a specific list, but it's things like toilet paper and laundry soap and those kinds of things that you can't get with your food stamps. And sometimes at the end of the month, your resources have run dry. So we'll assist where we can with those kinds of items. So those are kind of the main things. Other than that, it becomes a seasonal thing. We'll collect, of course, winter things when it gets closer to winter. We'll be getting close to our annual back to school event that will happen at the end of August this year. We'll have at least 6 different sites in our school district, and so there'll be specific items to donate for that or to get involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any last thoughts before we close it off?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking me good questions. And
it's been fun, been enlightening. I think a lot of people have the same questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think it comes with a frustration.
It does.
I don't know what to do. It doesn't seem like they're doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's both of that.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Yeah, you're right. We don't know what to do either. But we've been working at it for 10 years.
Well, you have a much better perspective on it than we do because you're there and you talk to them and you know what the needs are, what the frustrations are. So personally, I am really glad that you're here and glad that somebody called you over in Seattle and said, "Hey, Tim, how would you like to be the director of something you've never heard of?"
Click. Wrong number.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
sharing with us.
Welcome. Glad to do it.
All right.
If you want to search online for the 2 Cent Table podcast, here are the places you can find us: Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. You can follow us on social media as well on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have a topic idea for the show, if you'd like to be on the show, or if you have a way to connect us with some interesting potential guests, feel free to message us on any of our media platforms or email 2centtable@gmail.com. The 2 in that email address is TWO. And we'll consider your idea for future episodes. But that's all we have for this episode, so we'll see you on the next one.